The conflict in Ukraine has become a graveyard for tanks. Both sides have suffered heavy losses since the invasion began in 2022. Estimates of Russian tank losses range from 3,000 to 3,800, a staggering number by any measure. These losses represent a significant depletion of Russia's armored forces. Ukraine's losses are estimated to be around 1,100, a smaller but still substantial number for a country with limited resources. It is important to note that these figures are likely underestimates. They are based on visually confirmed losses, primarily through open-source intelligence. The fog of war makes it difficult to get an accurate picture of the situation on the ground. Both sides have an incentive to inflate the other's losses while downplaying their own. The true scale of tank losses may never be fully known. However, even conservative estimates point to a brutal conflict characterized by high levels of attrition, particularly for armored vehicles. The widespread use of anti-tank weapons, mines, and artillery has created a lethal environment for tanks on both sides. These losses have significant implications for the course of the war. Russia's ability to sustain offensive operations is increasingly in question as its tank forces are degraded. Ukraine, while facing its own challenges, has been more successful in leveraging Western-supplied anti-tank weapons to blunt Russia's armored advantage. The ongoing battle in Kursk offers a glimpse into the grinding nature of the conflict. In recent fighting, Russia lost 66 tanks while Ukraine lost 55. This near parity in losses is problematic for Ukraine, despite inflicting heavy casualties on the invading force. Ukraine's ability to replace lost equipment is limited, relying heavily on Western aid. Kursk holds strategic significance for both sides. For Russia, capturing Kursk would solidify its control over the Donbas region and provide a launching pad for further offensives. For Ukraine, holding on to Kursk is crucial for denying Russia these strategic gains. The city of Sudzha in particular represents a key stronghold for Ukrainian forces in the region. The fighting in Kursk is characterized by heavy artillery duels and close-quarters combat. Both sides are entrenched in defensive positions, making it difficult to achieve a decisive breakthrough. The high density of mines and other obstacles further hinders offensive operations. The battle for Kursk is likely to continue to be a war of attrition, with both sides seeking to grind down the other's forces. The outcome of the battle for Kursk could have significant implications for the overall course of the war. A Russian victory would be a major setback for Ukraine, potentially impacting its negotiating position. A Ukrainian victory, while unlikely to change the strategic balance, would be a major morale boost. The Russo-Ukrainian War highlights the stark disparity in resources between the two combatants. Russia, with its vast Soviet-era stockpiles and domestic production capacity, entered the conflict with a clear advantage in terms of military hardware. Ukraine, on the other hand, inherited a much smaller and outdated arsenal after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russia's military-industrial complex, while hampered by sanctions, has proven capable of sustaining a high level of production. Estimates suggest Russia can produce between 200 tanks per year and 100 per month, outstripping the combined output of NATO countries. This ability to replenish its losses, particularly in key platforms like tanks, grants Russia a significant edge in a protracted war. Ukraine, in contrast, relies heavily on foreign military aid to sustain its war effort. Western countries have provided Ukraine with billions of dollars worth of weapons and equipment, including tanks, artillery pieces, and anti-aircraft systems. This assistance has been crucial in enabling Ukraine to resist the Russian invasion. However, this reliance on foreign aid creates vulnerabilities for Ukraine. The flow of weapons and ammunition is dependent on the political will of donor countries, which can be fickle and subject to change. Furthermore, integrating Western equipment into Ukraine's predominantly Soviet-era military doctrine poses logistical and training challenges. Analyzing historical loss trends reveals insights into the evolving nature of the conflict. Russian artillery system losses, for instance, peaked in July and August 2024 before declining and then surging again in February 2025. This pattern suggests periods of intense artillery duels followed by lulls, potentially reflecting changes in tactics or operational pauses. High attrition rates for armored fighting vehicles have persisted since October 2023, indicating the continued importance of mechanized warfare in the conflict. The consistent use of armored fighting vehicles, despite heavy losses, underscores their significance in offensive and defensive operations. The decline in Russian tank losses since June 2024 could point to a shift in tactics, potentially reflecting a greater emphasis on conserving these valuable assets. These trends highlight the dynamic nature of the conflict. Both sides are constantly adapting their tactics and equipment in response to battlefield realities and the evolving capabilities of their adversary. Understanding these trends is crucial for assessing the trajectory of the war and predicting future developments. Section 5. The Soviet Arsenal, Russia's reliance on legacy tanks and domestic production. Russia's tank force is a blend of modernized Soviet-era designs and newer, though less numerous models. The T-72, a workhorse of the Soviet Army, remains a mainstay of Russia's armored units. While often derided as outdated compared to Western counterparts, the T-72 is relatively simple to operate and maintain, making it well-suited for mass production and deployment. Russia inherited a vast stockpile of T-72s and other Soviet-era tanks after the Cold War. While many were scrapped or sold off in the early 2000s, Russia has ramped up modernization efforts in recent years, upgrading these legacy tanks with improved armor, fire control systems, and engines. This strategy allows Russia to field a large number of tanks at a relatively low cost, compensating for technological shortcomings with sheer quantity. Russia's domestic production capacity is another crucial factor in its ability to sustain the conflict. Despite sanctions and economic pressure, Russia's defense industry has continued to churn out tanks and other military equipment. This self-sufficiency in arms production grants Russia a degree of strategic autonomy that Ukraine, heavily reliant on foreign suppliers, cannot match. Section 6. Quantity versus Quality, a Tale of Two Tank Doctrines. The Russo-Ukrainian War exemplifies the enduring debate between quantity and quality in military doctrine. Russia, with its vast manpower reserves and industrial base, has traditionally favored fielding large numbers of relatively simple and inexpensive weapon systems. This approach prioritizes overwhelming the enemy with a sheer volume of fire, accepting higher losses as a necessary cost of victory. Ukraine, on the other hand, has adopted a more quality-oriented approach, leveraging its limited resources to field smaller numbers of more advanced tanks provided by Western allies. Tanks like the German Leopard 2 and the American M1. Abrams represent the pinnacle of Western tank design, boasting superior armor, firepower, and optics compared to their Russian counterparts. The effectiveness of these two contrasting approaches is a subject of ongoing debate. While Western tanks have proven highly effective in Ukrainian hands, their sophisticated technology and maintenance requirements pose logistical challenges. Furthermore, the limited numbers supplied by Western allies cannot match the sheer scale of Russia's tank force. Section 7. The Long War Strategic Implications of Production Capacity and Foreign Aid. The diverging production capacities and reliance on foreign aid have significant strategic implications for both Russia and Ukraine. Russia's ability to sustain its own military production, even under sanctions, provides a degree of resilience in a protracted war. As long as Russia can continue to produce tanks, artillery shells, and other essential equipment, it can theoretically wage war indefinitely, regardless of losses. Ukraine's dependence on foreign aid, while essential for its survival, creates a strategic vulnerability. The flow of weapons and ammunition is subject to the political calculations of donor countries, which can be unpredictable and subject to change. A sudden halt or reduction in Western military aid would have a devastating impact on Ukraine's ability to resist the Russian offensive. This asymmetry in sustainability favors Russia in a long war. As the conflict drags on, Ukraine's ability to maintain its force levels and replace lost equipment will increasingly depend on the continued generosity of its Western backers. Russia, on the other hand, can leverage its domestic production capacity to wage a war of attrition, potentially grinding down Ukrainian resistance over time. Section 8. The Drone Revolution Reshaping the Battlefield. The Russo-Ukrainian War has showcased the transformative impact of drones on modern warfare. Unmanned aerial vehicles, once a niche capability, have become ubiquitous on the battlefield, providing both sides with unprecedented levels of situational awareness and precision strike capability. Ukraine, in particular, has effectively deployed drones to great effect, using relatively inexpensive, commercially available drones like the Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 to destroy Russian tanks, artillery pieces, and command posts. The use of drones has provided Ukraine with a much-needed force multiplier, enabling it to strike high-value targets and disrupt Russian operations with surprising effectiveness. The proliferation of drones has also accelerated the development of counter-drone technologies. Both sides are fielding increasingly sophisticated electronic warfare systems designed to jam, disable, or shoot down enemy drones. This technological arms race is shaping the future of warfare, with drones playing an increasingly central role in both offensive and defensive operations. Section 9. Can Russia sustain the offensive? Expert assessments and future projections. Despite significant losses and setbacks, Russia has adapted its tactics and continues to pose a formidable challenge to Ukraine. The International Institute for Strategic Studies, a leading defense think tank, assessed in February 2025 that Russia retains the capacity to sustain offensive operations for at least another year, highlighting the Kremlin's determination to achieve its objectives in Ukraine. Russia's ability to sustain the offensive hinges on several factors, including the resilience of its military-industrial complex, the morale of its troops, and the continued political will to absorb the costs of a protracted war. The effectiveness of Western sanctions in degrading Russia's war-making potential remains a subject of debate. The outcome of the conflict remains uncertain. While Ukraine has demonstrated fierce resistance and inflicted heavy losses on the invading Russian forces, the war has reached a stalemate. Russia, despite its losses, continues to occupy a significant portion of Ukrainian territory. The conflict's trajectory will likely depend on the continued flow of Western military aid to Ukraine, the effectiveness of Russian adaptation efforts, and the potential for either side to achieve a decisive breakthrough on the battlefield.